Well, my next guest is Tucker Carlson. You might know him from his eponymously titled show, Tucker Carlson Tonight, on the Fox News Channel. I know Tucker as a lifelong friend, and I'm thrilled to have him for the very first time here on Redacted. Tucker, welcome to the show.
I'm so honored to be here, Clayton. And I should just say I reached out to you because 3 times, not just because we're old friends and we talk anyway, but because 3 times in the last month, 3 separate times, I'm talking to people who don't know you or know that we know each other. You start telling me about watching you and Natali on Redacted. And I'm like, wait, I know them. I'm friends with them. No way. You know them? And I'm like, yeah, I literally know them. So I was like, I got to get on this show. So cool.
Well, that's hilarious. Well, that's really incredibly flattering. But I have to say the same thing happens to me all the time. You know, I was watching Tucker last night, and they don't know that I know you. And so yes. A lot of people may not know that Tucker and I were co-anchors when he first came to Fox News many years ago. One of the things I have to say I learned from you is that you are unflappable, and in ways that I have just never seen from another human being. And I want to ask you about that. In a week when, you've been taking all manner of, personal hits because showing January 6th footage that subverts people's narratives, you don't ever really seem to give a rat's ass when people like John Oliver call you out for being a preppy, or when politicians like Mitt Romney or Chuck Schumer call you traitorous. How do you protect yourself from taking things personally? And do you feel any of these slings and arrows this week at all?
I hate to say it. I know I sound like a sociopath, but I'm not. First of all, I'm not even aware of most of it because I don't have a TV and I don't spend that much time online. But I'm just the way I'm made. I had a difficult childhood when I was little, and that's sad. But it definitely inoculated me against caring what people who don't like me think. That's the kind of the one takeaway from my young childhood was you can't control what other people think. Decide whose opinions you care about, the people who you love, your family, your close friends, your coworkers, and then everyone else. I guess everyone wants to be liked. I really don't care, but like if some liar is attacking me, it's dogs barking. It means nothing. I would say my great fear in life is destroying myself through my own misdeeds. Lying or drinking again, or cheating on my wife, or doing something awful that makes everyone I love hate me.
Right.
I don't want to do those things at all. And so if I have nightmares, it's doing that. But like being attacked by people I don't respect, like Mitt Romney or Mitch McConnell or some other buffoon Schumer, I mean, it's like it doesn't even rate. It doesn't even mean anything to me. It's a foreign language.
And I mean, and people watching might say, there's no way that Tucker, who works in television, has one of the largest television shows in the world, doesn't have a television. And I can attest to that. I mean, we would sit there on the couch when we worked together, and people would ask, hey, Tucker, have you watched, this show on Netflix? And you're like, I don't have a TV. Like, this is true. He does not have a TV.
Yeah.
And you spend time in the woods fishing, and you enjoy life, and you're a great family man. You spend time with your family around the things that are important. So I can attest to that, firsthand knowledge of that.
Yeah, I mean, it does. Part of it is I'm very dyslexic, and so I don't process video very well. It makes me anxious to watch moving pictures. It's too much for me. So part of it's not that I'm just like so refined that I only read Balzac. It's, I do read actually, but it's not just that. It's that I just don't like video at all. One of my girls had a show on an iPad over Christmas, and I watched about 15 minutes and it was like kind of brilliant, but oh man, it just rattled my cage, it scrambled my eggs. Like it affected my sleep. It was too emotionally intense for me. So yeah, whatever. But the point is the things that matter in your life are right in front of you. They're your children and your spouse and your dogs and your college roommate and, your former co-anchor, like right. Other people who you know and love, your employees who you're responsible for. Like that's the point of life. It's not Twitter. I really believe that.
Hallelujah. Well, when we worked together at Fox, it was certainly a partisan time. I mean, even thinking back to like the 1990s, we didn't know each other then, but then you could have fun conversations about politics with someone. You could get together over a beer at a restaurant and so forth and talk politics. And now things have just gotten incredibly ugly and divisive. We see journalists now specifically not reporting stories if they don't like the outcome of those stories. Like like the U.S. destruction of the Nord Stream pipeline, you would think that a scoop like January 6th footage, like Watergate, right? You had competing newspapers that were like, oh shit, the Washington Post has this story. The New York Times is like, we've got to get our own confirmation of this story. Competing networks would want to rush to do their own reporting on the actual story, but instead they just want to tear you apart. So what do you think has happened to journalism? I know that you're a big proponent of it. You think it's largely one of the most important professions in the world. So what do you think has happened to journalism?
Yeah. Well, I've always thought that. I'm the son of a journalist, the great grandson of a journalist. I mean, I'm a reader. A lot of my heroes were journalists. So I've always thought that. I still think that. I don't think you can have a democracy without an informed population, and the way they get informed is through journalism primarily. So it's essential. It's an essential ingredient in self-government. You shouldn't treat it lightly or laugh at its demise. It's like a huge loss that we don't have it anymore, but we don't. Effectively, you have news organizations speaking on behalf of and for the benefit of the people who are already in power. It's a direct inversion of what we're supposed to have. It's terrifying, I think. It's also very annoying. And there are a lot of things that have happened, but I would say big picture, what you're seeing is religious wars. Even as people become less openly religious, I personally believe, despite all the barking about race and identity and black people and white people and Latinx or whatever they're calling themselves, I actually don't think racial divisions are as big a deal as we make them out to be. I have almost never met anybody of a different race who's mad at me or I'm mad at them. I think we overstate the level of racial division. I just don't experience it at all in my life. I mean, I live in a mostly white area, but I deal with a lot of people, including a couple of really close friends who are not white. That's not even an issue. We're pretending that race is the division when actually politics has supplanted race. This is what I'm just observing, and religion as the main dividing line. It's become its own religion. So people my age, I'm 53, are like, well, I remember when you could be friends with people who voted for different candidates,
Right.
But it's also true when I was a kid, there was a meaningful distinction between Protestant and Catholic. I'm Protestant, very Protestant. I didn't ever talk to anyone about Catholicism. I've never met a nun in my life. Our world was more divided along different lines.
Right.
If I'm just being honest, there was more racial division too in 1969 when I was born than there is now. And you see it in the polling. Would you be in 1969 when I was born, if you asked a cross section of Americans, would you be upset if one of your children married outside of your race? And people are much more free to say what they thought then also, but I think the majority would say, oh yeah, for sure. That number has been dropping dramatically. And I certainly feel it myself. But the question of whether you would be one of your children married outside your political affiliation, that's become much clearer. So in other words, your average liberal or your average conservative, your average Republican, average Democrat is fine. My daughter's marrying some guy from Ethiopia. Okay, great. Whatever. He's a good guy. I'm for it. That's how I feel anyway. But most people feel this way. But he's on the other side. He likes Trump or he hates Trump. No, that's a deal killer. So just again, politics has become something very different from what it used to be. It is the dividing line.
Right.
It's fascinating.
Yeah, it really is. And you've seen friendships destroyed over it. You've seen, if someone took a stand about a vaccine or about January 6th or said something on a social media post, their friendship is done. I mean, they've been
right.
They've been excommunicated, basically because of this. And you see,
well, it's crazy, but that's mostly one way, though. I mean, I wouldn't. Obviously, I'm not going to take an untested vaccine because the government tells me to. That's insane. So I didn't. I mean, and I don't judge others who did, but I would never take that. So I did not take the vaccine. No way. And now I'm really happy that I didn't. But I'm not mad at people who did. I have family members who did, loved ones who did. I'm not mad that they took the vaccine. I feel sorry for them secretly, but I wouldn't even say that. But if I go and say, well, I would never take an untested vax, I trust Pfizer, I don't think so. If I say something like that, people are very offended even now. And it's really kind of only in one direction. I'm sorry, that has been my experience.
I think you're right. And I feel so sorry for the people who were 70 years old and, they're not maybe as plugged in as you or I are and understanding what a corrupt, sort of criminal organization. Companies like Pfizer are actually, and
Yeah.
they just go along
Yes.
with what someone in their community told them to do, or there was the community center set up a vaccine drive, and so grandma felt like that was the best thing to do. The family was pushing them.
Exactly.
So why should we be angry at grandma for doing what the community was telling her to do? It seems insane.
No.
Yeah.
Well, it would be insane, and also a sign of bad character. I have to say, speaking for myself, as someone who, I mean, just to be blunt, is from an elite background. I grew up in rich places around rich people with power. It's very shocking for me to see my former world go completely crazy. Like, I have the least respect for the people that I grew up around, that I do for any group. I mean, I'll say this. Like, no one's Guatemalan housekeeper has ever yelled at me, ever. And I don't expect ever to be yelled at by a Guatemalan housekeeper. I'm dead serious. And I've taken pictures of quite a few Guatemalan housekeepers. Oh, Mr. Carlson, you are so great. Thank you. I have been yelled at multiple times on the ski lift in Jackson Hole by some private equity wife who went to Williams, you know what I mean, who spent an hour
Right.
this morning, in Soul Cycle, and she hates me. And she's calling me Hitler on the ski lift. Like, so it's very kind of social class specific. I find that the most radical people by far are the ones who've been the greatest beneficiaries of the rotten system that people like Trump, whatever his faults, called out. Or me, and I'm a product of that system. So I think I can fairly assess it. Like, I know how rotten it is because that's where I'm from. Those people are the craziest of all. It's 45-year-old angry liberal white female lawyers. They are the maddest people I've ever met in my life. If I never meet another 45-year-old female attorney who went to Williams, I will be happy, because those ladies want to kill me. I don't know what the hell is going on. I think it's because their husbands are weak. I honestly think that. I think weak husbands make angry women, or something very deep is going on. But you can't tell me I'm imagining this, because I can't go to the Snake River Grill in Jackson anymore, because one of these chicks is going to start screeching at me about white supremacy. White supremacy? What? I mean, like, what? I don't even know what that is. I know I'm against it. Like, why are you yelling at me, honey, and tell me I'm like overturning democracy? I bet if I went into the kitchen at the Snake River Grill in Jackson, I don't think a single dishwasher would yell at me. I am positive of that.
Well, you bring up something really interesting, which is something I wanted to talk about, which is this weaponization of language, right? You can just hurl something at someone and it shuts down conversation. So someone can just walk up to you and call you a white supremacist or a racist or any random, anti-vax, and it really is this weaponization of language. You've lived in DC for many, many years. Have you seen this, have you seen a shift in the use of language in that way? Maybe the left using it differently over the years to weaponize it?
Well, it's totally unmoored from physical reality or any variety of reality. I mean, words just aren't tethered to, real things at all. And I remember, and I love words, and of course I use words as you do for a living. That's what I do, is work with words. I think they have inherent power. I respect that power. I think the word's the most powerful thing in the universe, which is why despots try to control them. But I remember the first time I was called a white supremacist, I was really stung by it. I say I don't pay attention to criticism, but I'll never forget that day. It was 2017, and I just started the show that I'm on. A white supremacist? Like, what? And again, I'm not exactly sure what that is, but that's like the lowest. I mean, I'm from Southern California. Like, there were no white supremacists in my world. People didn't use racial slurs. Like, what? I mean, I grew up at like kind of like peak integration world. I'm very Dr. Seussy liberal on that stuff. Thinking, I can't believe they're calling me that. Some guy at Vox called me that. And I was like, do I sue? Like, I was so upset.
Yeah.
And then I was also bewildered. And then I realized over a period of years, now I've lost all feeling about it. It's just, again, it's meaningless. But that was purely an effort to make me be quiet on subjects that had nothing to do with race at all, like immigration or the economy, Nord Stream. Tulsi Gabbard, who's a wonderful person and a friend of mine, I remember she asked the simple question, like, why are we funding a war in Syria? And I thought that was a totally fair question. Shut up, racist! So they're calling like the non-white liberal Democrat a racist because she questions our Syria policy? And that's when I was like, oh, I get it. They're not sincere people. they don't mean a word they say. They just want her to be quiet. And they just don't want to talk about anything that matters. They want to talk about race, which is unsolvable. You're born a race, you stay that race. Okay, it's not an interesting conversation. I don't know why we're still talking about it. What's interesting are the things that you can affect and change, like whether or not to blow up the Nord Stream pipeline, whether or not to start World War III, whether or not to drive your economy into the ditch with your Fed policy. Like, these are real debates that we should be having, but we're not, because racist. It's all just a weapon designed to divert your attention from their crimes. And I'm just, now at this point, inside, I am bulletproof. I really don't care at all. You blew up the Nord Stream pipeline, you freaking criminals. That's how I feel about it.
And we just saw two amazing journalists go before Congress this week, Matt Taibbi and Michael Schellenberger. They are independent journalists exposing the deep state collusion with big tech, the censoring of voices. I know you've had Matt and Michael on your show. You would think that Congress would be interested in this, but instead members of Congress mocked them right to their face, even called them so-called journalists. Which is hilarious to me, so-called journalists. So what troubles you the most about this erosion of free speech, something you cover extensively on your show?
Well, it's the linchpin of freedom, of course. If you can't say what you think, then you're a slave. I mean, it's just kind of that simple. So if you're going to have a free country, the first thing you need to do, and the first thing the framers did do, was protect in writing the right to say what you believe is true. And that's the first thing they go for, because words are the most powerful thing. I should say, I want to revise what I said a second ago, and bless you for bringing them up. I was, groaning about journalism. I've been in it for 32 years. It's all I've ever done. And it's so distressing to me to see it collapse. But guys like Schellenberger and Taibbi, I would even say Russell Brand, who just was at my house this week for dinner, wonderful man. The gap is being filled, not enough, but to a remarkable degree, by people rising to the occasion, becoming something they weren't before. In other words, I believe in balance as a spiritual matter, is almost a matter of physics. I think it is a physics principle, balance. And so as things get shittier and people become worse and they tell more lies, there is balance in the universe where a certain percentage of people decide, well, I'm not lying anymore, and I don't care. Naomi Wolf is another one of them, who, if you'd said to me 5 years ago, would you be, texting feverishly in agreement with Naomi Wolf at 3 a.m? What? No. Right. Or Taibbi, for that matter, who I really respect as a man and a journalist, and is a good guy too. Elon Musk, while not perfect, has done a lot. Elon Musk, really, the electric car dude? Like, I never would have thought that. So there are these incredible miracles. They are miracles from my perspective happening, where these people, as everyone else, these people like Bill Kristol have just descended into the pit of filth. And it's so distressing as someone who once knew him. And I can say this of many people in journalism, the entire staff of National Reviewer, people I knew who've really become so diminished and are serving evil, in my opinion. That is counterbalanced by this explosion of your show. I mean, every time someone said Clayton Morris, I'm like, I love it. No, I mean it. It's not false praise at all. It's totally sincere.
Thank you.
It's just incredible how great, as most people have gotten worse, some people have just gotten great. I mean, Matt Taibbi and Glenn Greenwald, among everyone in journalism, probably spent more time attacking me personally by name in the 1990s and early 2000s than everybody else put together. I mean, they really hated me, and I really hated them. And now I have both those guys on my show. I don't interrupt. I don't say a word. I'm so honored to have them. I admire them. I'm not ashamed to say that. That's incredible. To have your own preconceptions overturned in a good way is one of the great joys of living, I think.
That's amazing. Well said. And it speaks to your evolution too in journalism and as a human being, right? I mean, to be able to see, you've talked openly about this. You and I have talked about this off camera, and I don't feel bad about talking about it now because you've publicly talked about this in interviews, sort of your evolution supporting it once the Iraq war back in the day. And then growing from that and becoming a real anti-war voice. And I think being inflexible is one of the worst human characteristics. I think being flexible allows you to grow in that way. And I think I will say this, you're an amazing example of that.
I would say even more than that, the most important experience in the life of a man is humiliation and failure. And I was not only wrong about Iraq, but I was so wrong that I was humiliated by it. And I mean, no one attacked me for it because that was the common view at the time, but I hosted a daily TV show in 2002 and early 2003 in the run-up to the Iraq War. Not only did I support it against my better instincts, but I also attacked people who didn't support it by suggesting they were like unpatriotic or on the side of terrorism. I really used the lowest possible propaganda techniques to smear people who disagreed with me. And then I went to Iraq in the winter of 2003, right after the invasion, and my life changed forever. And the reason it changed was because I realized how wrong I was. And I made the decision that I had to admit it, and I did admit it in December of 2003 in a New York Times interview. And I'll never forget it. I got a text from or an email from one of my former editors, who's a big neocon, was like, that's disgraceful that you criticized the Iraq War. And I remember thinking, I'm making a permanent break with my old life now because people won't accept this, but I just couldn't continue, A, to tell lies, and B, to pretend that I hadn't previously told lies, because I had. And so I do think the beginning of all wisdom is acknowledging just how screwed up you are. That's the basis of Christianity, but it's also the basis, again, of human wisdom. It's like, I'm the problem. I screwed it up. I am not God. If you start there, you're much more likely to wind up at the truth. And so I just made a decision, and it's hardened over the years, and now it's just ironclad. I'm not lying. I'm just not going to lie. I'm almost 54, not going to live forever. I don't care. I'm not going to lie. Now, if I started, using drugs and alcohol again, and maybe I would lie. I hope not, but I probably would. But in my current sober mind, where I've been for 21 years, I'm just not going to lie. And if I get something wrong, I'm just going to admit it. And people accept that. They appreciate it. It adds to your credibility. It doesn't diminish you. It enhances you. Oh, I fucked it up. I'm really sorry. My sincere apologies. I thought this. Now I know this. And I'm bringing it to you. If you do that, people trust you. Why wouldn't they? That's true in our personal lives, too. So I'm not lying anymore. And when I saw this Nord Stream thing and they tried to tell me it was Russia, and I said, why would Russia blow up its, I didn't know, but what, explain the motive to me here. Why would Russia blow up its main source of income? What, in the middle of a war? I don't think so. And rather than answer that question or come up with some hypothesis that might win me over, they immediately go to, oh, you're shilling for Putin. And by that point, I've never met Putin. I've never been to Russia. I love Tolstoy and Dostoevsky, but that's kind of the extent of my Russophilia. So, that's insane. I'm not shilling for Putin. I'm an American. Stop. What's the answer? And anyway, that's one of among 1,000 examples. What's wrong with natural immunity? Tell me how that doesn't work or whatever. To decide, I'm not going to lie. I'm not going to go along with these lies is the most liberating thing you can do. Whether it leads to professional success or failure, it doesn't matter. It enhances you as a person. It makes you stronger. Every time you tell the truth, you become stronger. You feel this power coming into you. By contrast, every time you lie, you get smaller and weaker and more afraid. Think about the times you've lied in your life to hide something from someone else. You become smaller and more afraid the more you lie.
Right.
And so it's been this amazing and beautiful experience for me to be in the face of all these lies and feel like I don't have to go along with this at all. And are you going to fire me? Okay, fine, go ahead. I'm still not lying. Are you going to arrest me? Go ahead. I'm not lying, period.
And they'll try to keep foisting crap on you. I want to get to the January 6th stuff in a second here and get you out of here. I want to try to be respectful of your time. But do you ever feel lonely? Because as far as the mainstream media goes, you are an island, a voice, an anti-war voice that I don't see anywhere else. We often feature you on our show as one of the only anti-war voices out there in the mainstream media. That's got to be just stunning to think about when the anti-war movement of the 60s and it's just gone, right? It's just dissolved. It's disappeared. Yeah. And now, if you speak out against the war, you're a Putin apologist or whatever. And do you ever feel alone in that? In the mainstream media, do you ever get the criticism, but do you ever feel alone in that?
Well, I did on February 24th, 2022, when Russia rolled across the border into Ukraine. and my position had been, consistent all along. Like, it feels like we're pushing these countries toward war. It's very clear to me the U.S. government wanted this war, has prevented it from ending. We know from Naftali Bennett, the former Israeli prime minister, that the Biden administration ended the peace accords between those two countries. They want war. And I said that. And I said that right at the beginning. To send the vice president to the Munich Security Conference a week before the war to tell Zelensky in public at a press conference, we want you to join NATO. And I said this at the time. I think every clear-thinking person saw it. It's like, if you were encouraging China to put nuclear weapons in Tijuana, like, that would be a massive threat to our country, to our national security, of course. And that's what we were encouraging. So why would you encourage that if you weren't trying to push Putin to war? Clearly they were. And I said that. And I mean, I don't think there was anybody who agreed with me in public, not one person. There were, a lot of people that I work around who were very offended by that. I still think it's true. It is true. As far as I know, it's true.
Oh, yeah.
And I've just never changed. I'm gratified to see that public opinion has swung. But again, even if, look, this is too big an issue to sit out, it's too big an issue to lie about. Maybe I'm completely wrong. Maybe Putin does have designs on Belgium. Maybe if we don't stop him in the Donbass, they're going to be in San Antonio. Maybe I'm just completely on another planet. Maybe there's no risk of nuclear war. Maybe the Biden administration really was trying to broker a peace. Maybe they're not trying to steal Crimea. I mean, maybe everybody is sane except me.
Right.
Maybe they didn't blow up the Nord Stream pipeline. At this point, I can only repeat what I believe, and I'm saying what I really think, and I think it really, really matters. And if I get fired for it, I don't know what to say. I'm not going to change. And if I will say, I probably shouldn't admit this, but the people that I work for, whatever you think of the company that I work for, one of them, one of the top people, texted me the other day about something, very nice text, and said, I just, but for the record, I really disagree with you on Ukraine. And I wrote back and I said, I know you do. And I'm so grateful that you let me disagree with you in public. This is someone I work for, a well-known person. I was like, I'm so grateful that you let me disagree. I think that's an incredibly rare thing. Right. I don't think that's allowed in any other news organization. So whatever you think of Fox, not a perfect company, of course. You worked there for years. But they are allowing me to say things they disagree with. And I think that's wonderful.
Yeah, that's amazing. That's amazing. Unlike what we've seen on YouTube, where our show has been blocked, banned, and taken down for having disagreements about the Ukraine war, and taken down for two weeks when we call it.
Are you serious?
Yeah, we've had 4 times now. 4 times that's happened over the past year because of their their pro-Ukraine stance, and when you call out the bullshit and show the propaganda and you share that information, you get blocked. I don't know if they've softened their position or not, but that's the way it's been.
That's crazy. I mean, but I guess the difference is I work for a huge publicly held company, and there are certainly downsides to that. But one upside is it doesn't matter what YouTube thinks. But if you're an independent broadcaster making your own journalism, and you've got in your case 3 children and like a life,
right?
This is your job. That's really scary. That's really scary.
And that's how they've been silencing voices. That's what they've been doing, taking down these small channels. They've been doing that. We saw that on Twitter, right? We saw what was happening on Twitter. So the Twitter files revealed exactly this collusion. I do want to talk about January 6th. So the January 6th footage, when Kevin McCarthy came to you and your team about going through this footage, did he ever, we're talking about caveats and conditions, what you just talked about with Fox. Did Kevin McCarthy come to you with any sort of caveats or conditions? Chuck Schumer has said, that Tucker's been cherry picking things he wants to show on the show, which is laughable, of course, because in my opinion, we got to see already cherry picked coverage during the January 6th hearing. So it's pretty hilarious and hypocritical to me. But anyway, your response to these cherry picking comments, and were there sort of any conditions about here, we're going to hand over 44,000 hours of footage. What was your thought on that? I mean, knowing you, like, holy shit, what? We're going to look at 44,000 hours of footage?
Well, we've been pushing for it since the first week. One of my children was in the building when that happened.
Wow.
One of my kids works in the Congress and called me. I was getting my hair cut. Ashley Babbitt had just been shot. He heard the gunshots because he was right there. I mean, as an employee, not as a protester,
right?
To be clear. But so I had been interested in it. Of course, I'm from Washington, so I had been interested in it. And since the first week, I had said we should, let's find out what really happened. Everyone's characterizing it, and my instinct as a journalist, but just also as a person, is let's know more. And they never turned it over. And for the record, I had been highly, highly critical of McCarthy, of Kevin McCarthy, for the last, I don't know, ever since I've been on TV, I've been critical of McCarthy. So we're not friends, for sure. Why did he give it to my show? Probably because I asked. I think we're the only people who asked. I mean, maybe there were others. I'm not aware of anyone else who asked. We asked. And here's the process in one sentence. We sent a bunch of producers up to Capitol Hill. They came with a bunch of different stories they were interested in. They got a computer system, the use of the Capitol computer system, which allowed them to pull up separate rooms by, location and time. They did not have facial recognition software, unfortunately, but they had this system which allowed, what was happening in the speaker's lobby at this hour, and they watched all the tape, many, many hours. And of the 41,000, a huge percentage, the majority, the Capitol complex is enormous. It includes the Library of Congress. There are security cameras in, closets. A lot of this stuff was just empty rooms. But of the relevant footage, we're not aware. And trust me, we spent a lot of time trying to figure out if we were being manipulated here. I don't think there's any way they could have manipulated it. It is definitely possible that we didn't find relevant footage, for sure. That's always possible. But the two things I know are no one got in our way, including the Capitol Police, who later denounced us. We ran all of our footage by Capitol Police before putting it on TV and said, just to be clear, you are saying this could be a security risk. Is it a security risk? And only in one case, he said, we don't want you to show the details of this door. So we blurred the door.
In the Jacob Chansley video. Yeah, that blurred section of the Jacob Chansley.
Exactly right. And I announced that on the air. That's the only change we made. But we vetted this, not because I thought it was a security risk. It's a public building that has tours through it every day. I thought the whole thing was ridiculous. So this security risk bullshit. But I went along with it anyway, just to say that we did. Okay? So we could never be accused of putting anyone's life at risk, absurd as that claim is. And then we put it on the air. The main problem we had was we didn't have facial recognition software. So I'm allowing for the possibility, I would say the distinct possibility, that we missed stuff. I'm sure we missed a lot of stuff. We did our best, and we spent a long time doing it, but 3 weeks. And the guys who did it, the producers who did it, were just absolutely fried. I saw them when they finished, and they they both looked like they went through a war. Just like staring at a screen for 3 weeks is a lot. But no, we had full cooperation from the Capitol Police and from the Speaker's office. But what we couldn't do, which is the main thing I wanted to do, which was show that there were FBI agents in the crowd. And there were, and the FBI has admitted that. But it's obvious to me they played a pivotal role. Ray Epps clearly was working for somebody. He was not a pure civilian. He encouraged violence, and then the January 6th committee and Adam Kinzinger and Liz Cheney and Benny Thompson and Adam Schiff, they all defended him. He's their friend. What? He's not an insurrectionist. He's an ally. Like, explain that. It violates common sense. Okay. Right. But we couldn't answer a lot of these questions because we couldn't identify the people positively. And because we couldn't put their video on the screen, because what if we're wrong? I mean, right. I tried to be as responsible as we could be. Like, there were a lot of things going on there, as you know, that were clearly part of something that was not organic. It was very obvious. Guys with earpieces, breaking things, and then running away when they're filmed. Like, what is that? And some of these people are so obviously cops. I mean, it's absolutely ridiculous, Right. Some like bodybuilder type with short hair and a MAGA hat. And he's kind of, spare me. A guy with a gun. This was, I know what's going on here. A lot of this was clearly influenced by federal agents or informants. It was, okay? But I didn't want to suggest that someone was a federal agent or informant unless I knew for a fact, because you really could get someone in trouble, right? If you're like, this is the guy, and like, but we don't know. I do know it's very clear that something very strange is going on with Ray Epps. We've named him repeatedly. We've invited him on the show repeatedly. I mean, don't lie to my face. Like, the Ray Epps thing is right. Isn't organic. Sorry.
Well, and we know from the Proud Boys trial this week that an FBI agent was caught lying on the stand in front of a judge, right? Turns out that the FBI hid evidence from defense attorneys. I mean, this came out in trial. This is not just us, bullshitting here. And that according to the defense attorneys, unless they're lying in this, and that's possible, there was initially thought maybe there were criminal informants there that wanted this information scrubbed, removed from the records. We now know that it actually might have been an agent who wanted this information scrubbed from the records. And of course, we're wondering, oh my gosh, in these 41 hours that Tucker's going to have here, will we be able to see any more evidence of the Fed's involvement? So it appears without that facial recognition, what's the next step then? If we don't have that, what will happen with this footage? Will anyone else be able to kind of go through it with facial recognition? Will Congress be able to do it?
What you need is crowdsourcing here. I mean, you need this to be in as many hands as possible. McCarthy has said, and I don't have ownership of this footage. It's publicly owned, of course. It's not owned by the Congress. They don't own anything. This is it's insane, actually, how they treat the U.S. government like they own it. I mean, that's like your housekeeper pretending she owns your bank account. Like, these are our servants, okay? But they get these attitudes, and it's hard to disabuse them of them. But he has said, we're going to turn this over to the public, and that can't come soon enough, as far as I'm concerned. We're a primetime TV show. We're not, in the fabled news division. We're an opinion show. So, we've kind of reached the limits, and it was only our show. Like, there was no other element of the company I work for, and there was no other news organization helping in any way. So I'm not whining, but we've kind of done what we could do. And from my perspective, like, the core claims about January 6th were a lie. It was not a violent insurrection, a deadly insurrection. It was a violent political demonstration, one of many in the year in which it took place. From January of 2020 to January of 2021, there were a lot of violent political demonstrations, including one at the White House where cops were injured, then at January 6th. Though if we could kind of leave it there and stop lying about it, I'm not defending vandalism or hooliganism or violence at January 6th. Of course not. I abhor that. Just don't tell me it's the same as 9/11. If you start talking like that, if you start lying to me, I'm going to push back. Clearly, Nancy Pelosi wanted this to happen. There was a lot of intel that it was going to happen. That intelligence was kept from line officers at the Capitol Police. I know that because I've talked to them, and including some of their supervisors, and they all say the same thing. We were not given this intelligence. Well, why is that? They were the front line in this. Why would you keep it from them? And of course, the answer is you would only do that if you wanted it to be ugly and discrediting for the political party associated with it. And that's obvious. That's obviously what happened. So, like, I'm a conspiracy nut? Right. No. I probably should be a little more. I'm way too conventional. That's my problem is that. You always used to talk about UFOs when we worked together, and I'd be like, wow, Clayton on his UFO thing. Turned out you were totally right on all of it. And that was like a huge lesson to me. You were just more open-minded than I was. And so it's not a matter of like falling for crazy theories. It's a matter of letting the evidence guide your perceptions. Okay? Like, what are we looking at here? Take 3 steps back. What does this look like? Ray Epps telling people to commit violence, but he's not prosecuted. Okay, well, the evidence suggests that this is not what it looks like, obviously. Same with UFOs. Same with the Kennedy assassination. All these areas that are like verboten, you're not allowed to ask questions. Well, why aren't you allowed to ask questions?
Right.
And the last thing I'll say is, like, they're not offended by craziness. They're not offended by conspiracy. If you go on TV tonight and say, I think the earth is flat, people just laugh at you. They don't care if you think the earth is flat. It's not a threat to anyone. But if you say, like, what actually happened with Building 7? Like, that is weird, right? It doesn't, like, what is that?
Right.
If you were to say something like that on television, they'd flip out. They would flip out. You'd, like, lose your job over that. Why? It's my country.
Right.
Is it an attack on my country? Can I ask you, like, I don't really understand. Do buildings actually collapse? No, maybe they do. I don't know. But, like, why can't I ask questions about that? Anything you're not allowed to ask questions about is something you should be asking more questions about, as far as I'm concerned.
Well, I could talk to you for another few hours like we used to do, but you have to do your own show. You have a lot of work to do. You're the most watched show in television, one of the most important shows in television news, and really one of the important voices that we all can turn to in times of craziness for some clarity, of thought. So I just want to thank you for taking some time out and sitting down with us here on this show. Our audience loves you. And this has been a real treat to go through this and be able to catch up with you, which we haven't been able to do for a few years.
Well, it's been an honor for me. And as I said in my text, when you're back in town, call me. Let's come stay at my house.
I would love that. And give my love to the family. And really, it's been a real treat having you here. So my thanks to Tucker Carlson. You know where to find him. All you need to do is have internet access, and you'll see him everywhere. Tucker doesn't have internet access, so he won't know.
Barely.
Right. All right. Thanks. Much love to you and the family. Thank you so much for joining us, Tucker. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, Natali. See you, man.
Bye.
Bye.